God didn't tell Noah to build an ark. In Hebrews chapter 11 on Noah, now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders of the Old Testament obtained good report. So the writer of Hebrews now want to open up the mysteries of the Old Testament and give us the revelation of it. Verse 7, by faith Noah, being warned of God of things not seen as yet, moved with fear, and built an ark for the saving of his house. God didn't tell Noah to build an ark. Noah moved with fear, having understood that judgment was coming, and built an ark to save his family. Now, the revelation of the Old Testament is the New Testament. Mystery does not demystify mystery. It is revelation that demystifies mystery. Now, secondly, if the ark of Noah was God that instructed, whatever God does is eternal. Why is the ark of Noah gone? There's no more ark of Noah today. Because the ark of Noah was a communication in typology of how that God will make a provision to save people from their sins. So just like Moses will say, and God will say, I have never had pleasure, because it cannot save anybody. The ark of Noah saves nobody. So it couldn't have been God who told Noah. But the Bible tells us Noah moved with fear and built an ark. So the question you want to ask is, who was that God that told Noah? Who was that God that was looking for how to kill Moses? Who was that God that said, I will go down first to see? God does not repent. So who was that God that was repenting? That's the question. Now, Hebrews 11:1 says, chapter 1 verse 1 says, at sundry times, in diverse manners, the prophets spoke to the fathers. So in the Old Testament, since nobody saw God, the Old Testament prophets spoke by types and shadows, and they spoke the revelation of Christ. The only thing in the prophet's mouth that was authentic was the message of Christ. The message of Christ. That's why the Bible in that Hebrews 1:1 says, hath in these last days spoken to us in his Son.
Now, his major argument is that we should use the New Testament to try to understand events of the Old Testament. So everything that we have read about the Old Testament may not be exactly as they were written. That we should use the New Testament to try to understand, those things that happened in the Old Testament. But then I have some questions. Now, when it comes to accounts of scriptures, especially in the Old Testament, you see, when people try to discard it, try to make it look like they didn't happen and all that. Now, Christianity is not the only religion in the world. There's Islam, there's Judaism, and the rest. The accounts we have in the Old Testament are mostly consistent with what you have in other books, other religious books. So for 1 minute, let's say a research by a professor who is not a Christian, and he decides to use 3 reference materials: the Bible, the Quran, and of course the book, the Torah, whatever it is that the Jewish people use as references. Now, there will be so many consistencies in the accounts. They will be similar, right? Now, those guys, for example, the Judaism, those that practice the Judaism, the Jewish religion, do not believe in the New Testament. That's the difference between them and Christians. So how do you explain to somebody that is not a Christian, or try to let's leave religion for 1 moment and look at this as a historical account. You're trying to recall what happened in history, and you're not telling somebody that is not a Christian that what you have in 3 books, the Bible, the Quran, are not consistent or are not true, because we have to use the New Testament to justify it. They don't believe in the New Testament. So how do we reconcile that? So I'm trying to look at this from the angle of maybe a research or an academic or somebody that does not believe in Christianity. You want to explain these things to them.